tonight. So there's all kind of scripture. There's over 78 verses in the Bible that talk about that topic. So if you got a verse, the first one, it should be in line one by one. So if you got the first one, go ahead and read it loudly for us. Okay. Be kind one to another, forgive one another. Who has the next one? Second verse, yep. All right, good. Who has the third verse? Okay. Next one. Okay. Walking kindly with our God. Next verse. Love is kind. Does somebody have that one? All right, good. Okay. One more. Okay, so what's the key word in all of those? Kindness. And we're gonna kind of pause on the last one that Brittany read, and she read a scripture that was the covenant between David and Jonathan as they talked about lending kindness to each other and to future generations of their children. And so as we think about kindness tonight, there's an old quote that says, "Every act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever forgotten." I want you to understand something tonight. You have the power with your words and the way that you act towards people to build somebody up or break someone down in seconds. You can have somebody broken in tears by a word. Not just tears for a day. You can have somebody for a week. You can have somebody for a month. Their whole life you can say something and somebody can be broken about that thing. Imagine words from a parent. Imagine important words that came to you from a coach or a teacher or a family member. You have power, and you have the power to choose what you say. You can break someone down, or you can build somebody up with kindness. And so as we jump into this, I want to teach you the right response tonight, and I want you to look at 2 Samuel chapter 9, and we're going to read a few verses here, and then we'll pray. It says this, "Now David said, 'Is there still anyone who is left in the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?' And there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba. So when they had called him to David, the king said to him, 'Are you Ziba?' He said, 'At your service.' Then the king said, 'Is there not still someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show the kindness of God?' And Ziba said to the king, 'There's still a son of Jonathan who is lame in his feet.'" Lord, help us as we look at your word this evening, God. Help it to take its root in our hearts and that we can apply it and live it in Jesus' name. Amen. So the first thing I want you to see tonight, and I think we have the first slide on this, Mephibosheth's condition and David's acceptance. First thing we're going to talk about is this lame boy named Mephibosheth. So I want you to understand a couple of things. Who even is Mephibosheth? Mephibosheth is Saul. You remember Saul, the same guy who was king, who was afraid of Goliath, who David came on the scene. David went to Saul when Saul was distressed, and he played the harp for Saul. Jonathan's father was Saul. Okay, so Mephibosheth is Saul's grandson, and at the moment, that's not the greatest thing to be, because dad and granddad have both passed, and now the kingdom rule has gone over to David. And in this situation, if there's a new king and you were a family member of the old king, fine. But if you're a family member of the old king who came after the new king, that might not be so fine. You might be thought of as an enemy. And so that's Mephibosheth. He's Saul's grandson. But the second thing about him, he was crippled. If you'll go back a few pages in your Bible, 2 Samuel 4, okay, it says that Mephibosheth had something happen when he was real young. I want you to hear about it. Okay. 2 Samuel 4:4. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. When he was 5 years old, when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nursemaid took him up and fled, it happened as she made haste to run that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth is crippled. Mephibosheth fell. This lady in haste took him. They had found out that Saul and Jonathan died, and so the nursemaid picks up a 5-year-old kid and takes off on the run, and his luck in his life, she goes on the run, he falls, and it doesn't say exactly what happened to his feet, but a bone broke or there was a contusion, and it was something that was never righted. He was never able to walk right again, and so Mephibosheth is considered lame. He was 5 years old when that happened. So about 2 summers ago at Camp Gotel, they put out, we take our teens there every summer, they put out a big tarp, and they're kind of filling it with water, a hose, and you could put a little bit of dish soap on it. Anybody ever done this before? Okay. So I'm taking off and flying down this tarp. I've got my kids kind of around. Well, Weston is not able to get on the big water slide out into the lake. He's not able to get on the lake boats, so I'm like, this is kind of perfect. So I grab up Weston, and I'm running with him and then sliding, okay? First time, it goes flawless. We go sliding. We're going super fast. I'm like, so the next time I get up, I'm a pro, and I'm like, I can do this even better, even faster. Put on a little more of the syrup, right? Put a little more of the Dawn soap. And so I get going the second time, and I'm flying, and I start to lose control of Weston. He's seated with me. Because at the end of it, I got to kind of come up to my feet the way that it was sliding into the grass. So I'm going to slide up to a stand, and then I'm going so fast that I keep sliding, even though I'm holding him. Well, when I'm transitioning from flying down to coming up, I lose the baby. So in the air goes tumbling Weston, and I see him almost as if in slow motion, doing a cartwheel in the air, and I'm like, oh, no. And I'm thinking that if I don't turn or spin a certain way, when he comes down, I'm going to crash on him. So as I'm coming to my feet, I'm trying to do a matrix move and not crash the baby, but I'm seeing him, and he smacks his head and rolls. And I'm like, all I can think in this moment, oh, no, I've crippled a boy. I've done him in for life. It's over. Like, I'm really scared, and I'm listening for his cry, and children have different kinds of cries, and I'm hoping it's like a normal kind of cry. When he catches his breath, he screams, but then I'm like testing him. I'm like, all right, as long Mom was not around, so I was in the good for a little bit. I'm like, all right, let's try walking. Let's test the limbs. And so he could walk, he could move, he cried a little bit, but I was scared about what happened. And so when you think about kind of what happened to Mephibosheth, he had this accident, and it wasn't righted. But it was also kind of a key happening. I want you to understand something. Even though it's really sad, he had a brother, weird names. I don't know why they picked these names. His brother's name was Ishbosheth and Mephibosheth. So y'all be thankful tonight, right? So you could be Mephib or Ishba, okay? Sheth was just a part of it. But anyway, so that's their names, and his brother Ishbosheth had been killed. And now Mephibosheth is lame, and so he is not able to become king. He's not able to take on all that means. And so because of those things, they're the rightful heirs. Now David is able to become king. If those things didn't happen, maybe they would have become king. But God allows those things to happen. They're key happenings because they would have been rightful heir, but due to his condition. And so that's who Mephibosheth is. He's from a place called Lodebar, and Lodebar means a place of seclusion, kind of out of the way. I wanted you to see it. I've got a slide for Lodabar, so look up here and see this place. All right. So if you kind of want to look up here and see the white circle, okay, Israel's down here, and up here past the Jordan River, off, I want you to picture what the woods kind of looks like, okay? See all these cities, all these places, all the names of towns all together, and then off to its own place. That's where Mephibosheth is. And there's kind of a point to that. They thought, okay, it had been some years now since David had become king, possibly 12, 15 years had gone by. And so they think that Mephibosheth was kind of off to the side, maybe in hiding, in a place called Lodabar, maybe trying to be secluded, away from everything that was happening, because his grandfather was coming after the now king. His grandfather tried to kill David. And so he's off to the side. So when you think about when David comes to him, and you're going to find out what happens, Mephibosheth is a scared person. Mephibosheth is a crippled person. Mephibosheth hadn't known his limbs to be working right since he's 5 years old. He's kind of had a rough life, even though he was born into a kingdom. The second thing I want you to see, okay, we see David's acceptance of him. We're going to look at Mephibosheth's cry and David's helpfulness. Look at we're going to start back at verse 3 and go all the way through 7. Then the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house Saul to whom I may show the kindness of God?" And he tells him, "There's still a son of Jonathan who's lame." So the king, verse 4, said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "Indeed, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lodabar." Then David sent and brought him out of the house. And look at verse 6. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, had come to David, look at here, he fell on his face, prostrated himself. Then David said, "Mephibosheth." And he answered, "Here is your servant." So David said to him, "Don't fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake, and I'll restore you to the land of Saul your grandfather, and you will eat at my table continually." So we're going to look at David's helpfulness. First thing I want you to understand, okay, can I have somebody come up here with me? Adrian, will you come up? You raise your hand first. Come on, here. I need you quickly. All right. So David comes. We're going to act like Adriana here is David. King David shows up. All right. I don't know if he had a wheelchair. Probably not. They didn't really. But he had something that he was in. And here comes David. And this is Mephibosheth's response, right? Falls down. He's at his face before him. Why do you think that would be so? Thank you, David. Why do you think that would be the case? What do you guys think? Why do you think Mephibosheth jumped to his face? He said he's afraid he's going to die. Right? You ever seen a war movie where somebody's captured? What do they say? "I surrender." Like Mephibosheth's response isn't, "I'm worshiping you." He falls before him and he says, "Here is your servant. Do whatever it is you want to do. I'm before you." And so Mephibosheth falls on his face. And I want you to think about something here. Okay? Maybe the greatest moment of his vulnerability. Maybe at this moment for Mephibosheth, he felt a lifetime of name-calling at this moment. Y'all ever been made fun of about something? And you thought about it, and you thought about what those people said? Maybe in this moment, as he's laying there, it came flooding over him, and he heard those taunts again. Worthless, despicable, supposed to be a son of a king, can't even rule the kingdom. Probably he expected disdain from David, like, "You're supposed to be royalty?" Crippled, outcast, lame, a person of shame, unfit to be king. I can remember in 6th grade, I liked this girl, and I summons the courage at year end to write a note. That's how much courage I had. I didn't go to her face, but I summoned the courage to write a very poetic and beautiful philosophical note. It said, "I like you. check this box if you like me. I did not have a box that said don't like. I wasn't given that option. Okay. And so I wrote this note, and I got no response for a day, 2 days. Well, so it's getting close to the end of the school year, and I go and I hear these girls talking. They're kind of laughing. Her name was Erin, and I see her talking to a group of girls, and she doesn't know that I hear them. And she says, "Can you believe that Chubbo would ask me if I like him?" So my little 6th grade heart goes, but what happened after that, I made up my mind that summer. I said, she didn't know what she called me chubby. So I went home, and that's the first time I introduced myself to some weights. I worked out all summer. I knew one thing. I wasn't going back to school as Chubbo, okay? That wasn't going to happen. My heart was crushed. I needed this girl to see a not Chubbo version of me. And so I remember that feeling, and I thought about Mephibosheth here. Even now as I think about it, I'm 37 years old. I don't like that me had to hear that. I didn't like how that felt. Y'all are looking at me. I get a whole lot of grief about my height, okay? A lot of people have something to say about my height, and it's okay. I can handle it now. But if it goes on, and if the same person says something about me being short like 30 times, like, okay. Like, I don't know what else I can do. I'm not going to get any bigger. And so I know how that feels, and as you think about this. There's people in this world that are crippled. There's not a whole lot they can do about it. There's people in this world that are outcast. And if you go to a lunchroom, you'll usually see them. There's people that are marginalized. They're judged by other people. And so when you see how David responds to him here, it's kind of a big deal. David didn't call him a name. There's this old saying that's philosophically untrue. It says, "Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me." It's false. You have the power with your words to build or break down. Words hurt. Jokes do hurt. Sarcasm does hurt. Little jabs hurt. David didn't call him a name. Look at what David said. David said, anybody there in verse 6? You know what he says? Doesn't call him lame. Doesn't call him dog, crippled. David calls him by his name. He says Mephibosheth. And this is a bigger deal than maybe you understand. Don't miss this gesture. He could have called him anything. "Yes, you are my servant," you rightfully had said. No, he says Mephibosheth. I want you all to, maybe just by a raise of hand, how many of you, if you were honest, say, "Pastor Rick, I've been hurt by words"? Y'all take a look around. Almost everybody here. You've been hurt by words. So Mephibosheth's cry here and David's helpfulness is a big deal. Well, I want you to see kind of the end of what happens, verse 7 through 13. We see Mephibosheth's communion and David's covenant. Look at how it ends, verse 7 through 13. "So David said to him, 'Do not fear. I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan, your father's sake, and I will restore you to all the land of your grandfather, and you'll eat bread continually.' Then he bowed before him and said," look at what he says, "What is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I?" And the king called to Ziba and says, "Give to him all that belonged to Saul and to all his house." And as you go down there, I'm going to get down to verse 11. It says, "Then Ziba said to the king, according to all my lord that thou hast commanded, I will do." And he says in verse 12, "Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants of him. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem and ate at the king's table continually." So what happens here? First of all, David says to him, remember, Mephibosheth is down on his face. He's afraid for his life, like Carrie said. He's scared that he could lose his life. This is his grandfather's enemy. And David's the first thing he says, don't be afraid. Okay? I want y'all to understand something. When you're talking with someone who needs acceptance, how important it is that you make them feel at ease. When somebody walks through these doors, you make them feel at ease. Are you inviting to somebody else? Are you kind enough to be inviting to people, or do you kind of do your own thing and keep away? He said, don't be afraid. You're welcome here. And then he said this, the second thing. He said, I loved your father. I loved your father, Jonathan. And I don't know if you remember this from a few weeks ago, but David and Jonathan made a covenant. They promised each other when Saul came running after David, they made a promise in a field that they would take care of each other and their future. They would look out for each other. And he said, I loved your father. He said, I'm not scary. I loved your father. And then he says, I'll restore you. I will bring you back to what you were. You guys remember reading in the Bible or hearing about the prodigal son? Anybody heard that story? Prodigal son's story about the son who wanted his inheritance. Give me all that's supposed to be mine. And then he ran off and squandered it. He ended up in a pig pen, eating from the pig's trough. And he came to himself while he was eating pig's food, and he said, man, I'd be better as a servant at my father's house. If I just go back to my father's house, then I can eat regular food. And so the picture here that's similar is this. Mephibosheth hadn't done anything for David. He's done nothing at all for David. He hasn't gone to him. He hasn't done something special for him, hadn't promised him, but David sought to do something kind for somebody else. In the story of the prodigal son, the father, when his son comes home, it says he killed a fatted calf. He got a robe and put it on him and put a ring on his finger. And he said, we got to have a celebration. My son's returned home. And so David is a picture like this. He's just come to restore. He's come to be kind. Let me ask you a question. When's the last time you woke up and said, I'm going to look for people today to be kind to? Not for any reason. Next time I go to church, I'm going to look for people to be kind to. I'm just going to be kind. And this is what David does. He says, I will restore you. And that meant a lot more than you're hearing. He doesn't just say, I'll restore you. He gives a promise. He says, I promise. And when David gives a promise, look what it means. It says, you will eat at the king's table. Okay? That means more than you're just going to have a feast. That means more than just some chicken dinner, some KFC, okay? King's Fried Chicken. It means more than just some meals. It means that he will continually, and that's what it says, you'll have food for life. Not just food for life. It means that you're going to have finances for life. You're going to have family for life. If somebody came to you tomorrow and said, your food, your finances, and your family is going to be taken care of forever, how many of you going to raise your hand? Check. Okay. I want in on that. And that's what David says. He says, I'm giving you this promise. And so he tells this crippled boy, I'm going to take care of you. And I want you to think about something in your own life. You know what might not sound that pleasant to a king? It might not sound that pleasant to a king to add a former enemy into his life. It might not sound that pleasant to a king. Y'all think about what it takes to take care of a crippled person. It might not sound that great to a king to add that to his life. But I want you to ask this question to yourself, and we're close to wrapping up. Why does God adopt us into his family? Is it because of our personal goodness? Is it because you have, when God looks at personalities, he goes, Adriana, she's at the top. Alyssa, she's number one. When I'm looking at, is it because of these great personalities or our charm? We're so charming that God can't resist. He's like, they're the best. I've got to have them. Or our great talents. God's like, man, they can do anything. I need them. Listen, my place and your place, not at King David, but at the King of Kings table now and for all eternity, is a constant reminder of how God takes a person who would have been abandoned, and he reaches down and shows us kindness. He grants us a place at his table. We couldn't earn that. We couldn't do anything to get that place. You can't heap up enough good works. You can't walk enough old ladies across the street. You can't serve at enough food pantries to earn God's grace. He just gave it. And that's what happens with David and Mephibosheth. Wyatt went to school when we were in Indiana. And he came home, and he was actually crying. There's a little boy that was deformed in his class. I think he had been burnt, but there was some scar on his face, and his face wasn't completely aligned. It was kind of misshapen. And a lot of the kids in the class really struggled. Wyatt, like I said, he came home, and he actually was crying, talking about it. And I don't think it was that he was just scared of him, but a lot of the kids talked about that they were scared of him. And so I kind of sat with him and talked with him and just encouraged him. Listen, he's a person just like you are. He didn't ask for this to happen in his life. I said, just try to talk to him and see what happens. One of the proudest things with him, my son has a tender heart. And so he went back, and after a few days, Wyatt came talking about Jackson, his buddy. This has become his good friend. And he would look so forward to going to school and seeing this boy and reaching out to this boy. Why? Because he wanted to be kind. David's kindness, listen, came from an overflow of his heart. What's in your heart is going to come out of who you are. It'll show. If people think that you're kind, it's going to be coming out from that overflow. Because Galatians that we read today, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, and it said kindness. What's in your heart will come out. I got a little video I want to show on the butterfly effect. I want you guys to watch this, and then we'll close in a moment.
You've heard of the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings on the other side of the world. By the time it gets to us, it's a hurricane. It's the idea that little things can have big consequences. Now, this is especially true about the choices we make when we're young. You see, every decision ripples out into our world and our future in ways that we can't possibly imagine. And we carry them to the end of our days. The choices we're making right now can affect our long-term health, our ability to get a job, our future spouse, our kids, our grandkids, everything. What you do will always be with you. But there is one choice that towers over all the rest. Get it right, and every bad decision you've ever made can be wiped away. Get it wrong, and a lifetime of good choices will one day turn to dust. When you choose to follow the Creator, when you choose to surrender your ways to Him, when you decide to trust Him with your life, you will have figured out the one choice that really matters. You see, the beat of a butterfly's wing may or may not change the world, but the choice to follow Christ will change you and countless others forever.
I got a final slide I want to put up. It kind of has some questions to apply what we've seen happen here. I want you to think of it like this. Every situation in life is like a little fire. Not big, not out of control, not destructive yet. And God's given you an opportunity like having a bucket. Picture you have a bucket in each hand. One bucket is water and the other is gasoline. At a point, you're given a choice. You can pour the bucket of water on fire, or you can pour the bucket of gasoline. Here's the key for you guys. You have the power to choose. I said that at the beginning. You have the power. Nobody has the power to choose how you impact the world but you. It's all on you. I don't get to choose your choice. You have that power, how you're going to impact people and how you're going to impact the world. And whether or not you're going to be kind with your words, kind to people, is your choice. And you can impact this world and it go on and the ripple effect continue for generations. Or you can be elevator music to life. I say that a lot, but it just means you have had no purpose. You've chosen to live a pointless, a meaningless, a valueless life. In every situation, you can utter words that bring dignity or words that demoralize somebody. Words that show acceptance or words that communicate rejection. Words that restore or destroy people. Words that are kind words or words that hurt. David chose to give words that will build up rather than tear down Mephibosheth. So I want you to think about this. We carry around buckets in every situation. From which bucket are you drawing? Are you given to complaint? That's the fire bucket. Are you given to argument? That's the fire bucket. Are you given to kindness? And the last question is this. What David did for Mephibosheth, God does for us. Just as the king brought in the outcast in the palace, made him a son, God adopts us as family. You and I are Mephibosheth too. His life and ours are similar. We come into a relationship with the Father in our brokenness, out of our shame. And you know what he says? He says, don't be afraid. He says, I'm going to give you everything back. I'm going to restore you. Even though sin has taken your life, it's crippled you, it's made you weak. I'm going to give you an inheritance. One day you'll live in eternity with me, blessings and riches. But more than that, I want you to forever be at my table. And I'm going to call you my child. So my last question on that slide is, are you eating at the king's table? Right now. Jesus gave his life so that he could restore you. Are you at the king's table? You see, Mephibosheth could have fell to his face, and David made him that offer, and he could have said, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to stay at Lodabar. I'm going to stay right here exiled. If you're not going to mess with me, king, if you're not going to kill me, if you're not going to get in my life, I'll just stay right here kind of hidden off to myself. And you can do that with Jesus. He makes an offer to you that's better than anything that you could ever imagine. And what you can do is you can look in the face of Jesus and say, no, it's not worth it to me. I don't want to eat at your table. I don't want to feast in your goodness forever. I'm going to do it my own crippled way. It's your choice. Are you eating at the king's table? I want y'all to bow your heads and close your eyes. We're going to have an invitation.